Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you for joining us for one of our talks today. Today, we are joined by the wonderful Jason Scott Lee to talk all about the Disney Plus series Doogie Kameāloha. And I wanted to start by talking about working within the comedy space on this show because, you yourself have talked about how this is a space that you've worked in a little bit less character-wise and performance-wise, but also it's something that you felt very comfortable with at the same time. But I was really interested in finding that specific comedic voice because it's not just about the comedic aspects of your character, even down to are there moments where we're laughing at him a little bit or are we always laughing with him? There's also the way that like his comedic voice as a character tessellates within his family relationships and people around him to really match the overall aesthetic of the show as well. So it's not even just about your individual performance comedically and figuring out those beats. And so what did that journey look like for you in finding all of those details for your performance in this series?
I think going in, I felt fairly confident even after the creative meetings with Courtney Kang, who was penning the show and kind of shaping this. So when we met, they didn't really have a clear cut picture of what Benny. They kind of had in their idea. It's always an intellectual thing, and we started going back and forth. And I said, a lot of the presence of Benny is kind of an island boy kind of thing, and that's really like what, as far as I wanted to share, was that sort of that grounded island boy, a little bit of naivete, but kind of still has that wonder about the world and the excitement. But and in that he's kind of, the whirlwind around him is such a professional world where he's just sort of in this kickback kind of like mode. And I think coming from the islands, growing up here, I'm a bit two steps ahead in the sense that the rhythm of the type of comedy that I kind of felt like the character needed was really ingrained in that sensibility of about kind of how a lot of me and my friends kind of just banter back and forth, and that kind of local boy. It's hard to explain, but it's sort of an innate local boy kind of thing. So it was fun bringing that to fruition because I had never really played that, and most of my work has been dramatic, and so I think even the creators were questionable as to like if I was right for this tempo. I was right for this medium, and I think we found a happy place to be. And I posed a lot of questions to the producers and directors, and I said, well, one thing too was not only the comedy but the authenticity of the Hawaiianness of that, because in Hawaii, a name such as Kamealoha carries a lot of weight. There's something that, there is something in the name.
Mm-hmm.
And, I said, try to make sure that the rest of the cast says their family name correctly, because, and it's kind of funny in a ways because, they did have problems with that. Even with Doogie's name, Lahela. A lot of everyone was saying it Lahela, and I said, oh, no, you have to say it Lahela. I mean, because it means something. So little nuances like that I kind of picked up on, that I tried to share with the creators, and the comedic side was kind of finding the tone. It was never really, and I think we are continually going about it, as they see more and more my timing, more and more what that local timing is. And really, because I think I'm kind of old school Hawaii, that Benny is kind of like the heart and soul of what the Doogie Kameāloha show is, because it really, I do, I kind of carry that, I embody that island thing. So that's um the looks and things are kind of semi animated, and that's really the type of humor I think that Benny carries with him. while everything was spinning around him.
And you're bringing up that idea that he does have that real, almost like childlike wonder about him still as an adult, but that's not a negative thing at all. It's a really wonderful facet to him as a character. And he's really kind of got that wonder. And even when you were saying that he still has a little bit of naivety, he's an incredibly emotionally intelligent character that reads people very well and kind of knows how to feed into and give them the energy that they need from him. And was there a challenge at all to making sure that it always came across like, when he has those slight moments where you feel that childlike energy or that slight wonder or naivety or those aspects, which we tend to associate with immaturity, that it still also came across that it's not that, it is a real astuteness in him, and he just responds to people in a different way and connects to people in a different way.
Yeah, and I think that is something that I pick up from the elders here is that there's you see all these elder aunties, they just have this animation, this light about them, and they're so happy, and but there's a wisdom in it, there's a wisdom because of the experience that they've gone through and all that. So even though it is excitable at times and things, but there's always something behind it that there's a lesson there. And I think that's what we try to capture.
Yeah. And going back a little bit to what you were saying about some of figuring out the voice of the show as well, it sounds like in making the show that Courtney Kang would like that you would do different versions and different takes, and because as they were figuring out the voice of the show tonally, that there would be that opportunity to play a scene in 3 or 4 different ways a lot. And so did that open up a lot of space of discovery for your performance? And what are some of the different spaces that you really wanted to have the opportunity to try out, even if you weren't sure whether that was going to land as the final version for Benny?
Yeah, a lot. I had problems in the beginning because I'm so used to a feature film tempo, and this is actually the first TV series I've done. I mean, as a regular, I've had guest spots on TV, but and as far as comedy is like, I realized the pacing has to be picked up, for the jokes and everything to kind of, go in sync and be copacetic and I literally, it was jarring at first, like they said, "Oh, can you do it a little faster?" I said, "Faster means funnier." Is what I didn't know, it's like, so that was a tricky thing. And then, just the way we carried it out, was was pretty hard to do.
Yeah. And obviously the show at the beginning, the first couple of episodes or any show are just kind of introducing us at the beginning to all of the different ensemble of characters. But now that we're getting further into the season, there's so many great additional details that we're getting for your character. We're getting a lot of his backstory with his father and some of the regrets that he carries from not spending enough time with him. We now know that he used to be a stockbroker and he used to operate in an entirely different way in his day to day. And he let his work consume him. And that's very polar opposite to how we meet him at the beginning of the series. So that's really beautiful to explore that arc. Was that a lot of information that you had up front in the show? Because obviously you don't often have the scripts for the entire series. Or how much information did you have about his backstory and aspects like that versus what were you filling in the gaps for and then kind of pivoting details and shaping it in as you got the information?
Yeah, those, as we were filming, there was really no, I mean, they presented us with maybe 3 episodes, and then the first three, and then after that you really didn't know which way it was going. You're kind of going blind, and then you're like presented like, oh, okay, this is gonna happen. Oh no, now in episode 6 that's gonna, oh, okay, I see where this is going. So it was an acceptance of the creativity of the writers, and going into it. And I think, one of the things I was able to kind of tap into with Benny's history as far as his family, was that one of the character of Uncle John in it, who was played by a very iconic in Hawaii, a very iconic Al Harrington. He's been he's been kind of an ambassador to Hawaii for so many years, and that real old school, like cheery kind of like aloha giving, this kind of character. And when he was cast as Uncle John, I was like, wow, this is going to be easy for me, because already I had high respect and high regard for him, just as a decent man and a man of Hawaii, um, and that, you know, what he brought to it was so much weight and so much kind of like this ohana of this family feeling that you know, unfortunately he just recently passed, um, and right almost close to the after the end of the show, and so there's this fond remembrances, you know, of being able to work with him after, you know, knowing that he was, you know, as a celebrity so for so many years. I had never worked with him as an actor, and he had done a number of 5-0 spots. But I think that, you know, those bringing that kind of casting and bringing the authenticity of those uncles, as we call them, and seniors, really elevates the the weight of the show, even though it does have its comedic, you know, sensibility.
It does. It does a beautiful job at capturing the emotional undertones alongside the comedy and balancing between those spaces. And once you got a lot more of those emotional undertones, particularly when it comes to his relationship with his father and getting to learn those aspects that we were just talking about carrying regret, because it feels like that's something that he doesn't necessarily spend a lot of time dwelling on the past, but there are those quiet moments where it sits with you and it still is an inflection for him. And so once you played those scenes or even just had those details in the scripts, how did that shift some of the layering and some of the emotional aspects that you wanted to bring forth in your performance with him as a character?
Um, there was, it's hard to explain that kind of thing because it's like, I guess because it's so much about my history as a person, like with my father, and bringing, you know, all those kind of private moments, and feeling those moments, and being around, because my father was very salt of the earth, old school, you know, he could have been a rancher, you know, kind of thing, but uh it's being as a kid being around that, all his friends, and how they used to talk and how they used to, you know, engage and telling stories, and that feeling of people speaking pidgin English. I mean, that, yeah, I kind of grew up with that, you know. It wasn't proper English, but there was like people, the older generation had this grit about them, you know. Nothing was glorified in the sense, it was just very kind of like real, and those are the things that I try, you know, to reminisce on in order to bring the realism of Benny's background. You know, although it's one thing we talked about with Courtney, was the first thing I asked her, I said, "What school did Benny go to?" Because in Hawaii, that says a lot. It talks about your demographics, about what, you know, what part of town you were raised in, and because in Hawaii, like many other microcosms, I think in the U.S., we have very poor areas, very rough areas, and some areas that are more uh, elevated, you know, in the sense of they got more things. Um, and she said, "Oh, I think we should find a happy medium. We don't want him to like, you know, this." And so they chose a private school called Iolani, which is, you know, but I know a lot of guys who've gone to that school, but they grew up in a very, you know, kind of wholesome, grounded, uh, old school way. But they, you know, they went off to the East Coast to get educated and all that. So we kind of, you know, chose that, and then that kind of helps develop the emotional through line because of where you come from. And I think that that plays a lot into Benny's emotional state and how he deals with his uncle John, and the feelings of missing out on some time, you know, being so caught up in his career. And I don't necessarily have that, but in my life, but I can see that where that would be, you know, a real detriment, like in an Ohana setting. Yeah.
And also when it comes to his partnership and his marriage with his wife, played by Kathleen Rose Perkins, there's like even the detailing between the two of you of they chose to live. They had their kids in the mainland and then they chose to move to Hawaii. And I thought that also says a lot about the types of parents that they wanted to be and how they wanted to raise their kids and how they viewed their kids' futures and upbringings. And did you find that details like that also just gave you a lot of richness in really understanding a lot of aspects, and especially because obviously so much of your character in the show is about who he is as a father to these kids?
Oh yeah, I mean, it reminds me of our family. My parents met and married on in California on the mainland, and the both of them were from the island of Oahu in Honolulu. And I was the third child. And as soon as I was born, my father said, "You know what? I want to raise the kids around their cousins and their aunties and their uncles and things." So we moved back, and I was only maybe 1.5, 2 years old, and that's kind of a thing that I reflect on and say, hey, that's kind of like Benny and Clara, it's like they did, but and my father did, uh, he was a operator for the telephone company, the Hawaiian telephone company, and an engineer, and so it kind of like, it wasn't the shave ice guy, and he wasn't a surfer, but there was that, for simple lifestyle that we had, because you're just trying to make ends meet. So there's I mean, I think the Kamealohas have a nicer house than we did, but all the elements are there. Trying to raise the family, and I think Benny's really overjoyed by the fact that Clara can accept that culture and fit in, because even as we call mainlander, it's hard sometimes for people to find a footing in a new place, and especially one with such a subculture and culture and local folklore and all that. And as a melting pot in Hawaii, it's so rich with so many different races and ethnicities, and people are often kind of surprised, like, well, what kind of footing? You go to a party, and there's this multitude of ethnic foods, and you're like, oh, should I eat anything? Should I try anything? So I think hopefully they tap into stuff like that. That would be fun.
Yeah, I mean, even off the back of the fact that you're saying that it's great for him that she's open to moving there and raising their family there, at the same time, they're both so supportive of each other in so many ways. He's never the dad who's like, "You're never home. You're working long hours. Oh, you want a promotion? You'll be gone even more." He's the person saying, "You want this, so go for this, and
Yeah.
we'll figure this out as a family." And that's the way that he really approaches all of his interpersonal dynamics within the family. But I just thought it was a really beautiful way to explore a marriage on screen between these two characters. And was it something that was important to you and Kathleen, that it really come across as a really cohesive and collaborative partnership between the two of them?
Yeah, I think there was with Kathleen. It's easy because she's it's so easy to talk to, and comes with no airs, and we just kind of like, we just had mutual respect for one another, and it was just, we just gelled. It was actually like effortless. So there was this, I listened to her and she listened to me, and we had this kind of thing, and we never like tried to, in a sense, one up each other or anything like that. So I think it does, that off screen like chemistry that we have, that's so like kind of respectful. I think it really plays well on screen, because it is really, we like each other, and we, it's kind of a fun thing. We're even in the green room when we're waiting or something, it's like, I'll start talking pidgin, and she's like, "Oh wow," it's kind of, so a lot of her reactions are kind of very, very authentic, in the way that she's starting to get to know the islands, and get to know, like, where I'm from, and where this all goes, and I'm kind of listening in on where she was raised and how the character of Clara will, handles things. So it's kind of a nice, tit for tat, kind of back and forth.
Yeah. And obviously, the show is a lot about Lahela as the show's Doogie navigating that space of what does it mean to be a child genius and to be a child that's stuck between an adult world and a child world, because she's not in line with her peers in the same way, but she's also not in line with her coworkers in the same way. But also what that means for Benny as a parent, because there's no roadmap for, firstly, raising kids is already a mystery and navigating it. And then there's the added thing of there is no roadmap for how to raise a child genius like her as a parent as well. And he goes forth at it, both of them do, again, like with a lot of confidence and emotional connection. But there are moments where there's slight fallibilities and they're not necessarily sure how adult do we let her be in this moment? How much is she still a kid to us because she's straddling those worlds? And so how did you want to play around with that balance and that challenge that he's navigating as a parent throughout the show?
I think there's a, sharing a bit of the frustration, kind of like also moments of being in awe of her ability, and taking into consideration the things that are, very kind of basic, like principles of parenting, like, be home before 11, that kind of thing, and kind of like, watching who she hangs out with, and the attitude thing, like kind of keeping the attitude in check, and all those things. I think those are more things, and I think just spending time, like, being able to, like we did in the opening pilot, taking Lahela for a surf, keeping her active, keeping her having a good feeling about herself, so that she can do the best job she can in the hospital, and sometimes out of the hospital. But yeah, I think those just basic guidelines for being responsible and decent and proper, and yeah, I think we kind of try to get her on about that.
And like we were talking about before, Benny's a character who really gives so much heart and so much emotion to other people, and he really gives his energy over to other people, even if it is, grab the surfboard, we're going out because I know that you need this, and I know that it's going to make you feel a certain way, because he's always thinking about feelings and emotions in that way. And so, in working on scenes with a lot of your scene partners and castmates in the show, how did that feed into the way that you were then reading their energy within the scene and thinking about the specific energy that you needed to give them as a scene partner?
Well, all the people they cast are wonderful actors. And, it's so fascinating to work with the younger actors, because I like to see what choices they make as far as in response and expression and all that. So I'm always like so fascinated and curious, like, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say this a certain way. And like, I was like, I want to see, what you do with it. So there's a bit of that mentorship kind of like happening, and usually, like, they come prepared, and they really step into a professional environment. I mean, especially Peyton, she has that ability. She's like such a spot on professional. She'll memorize my lines, and when I forget them, and it's like, I'm like, darn it, it's like embarrassing because of that. But yeah, I think and sometimes I can tell, like, if I'm in a certain place, a certain mood, they'll be sensitive enough to pick up on it, and they'll start dropping into it, and I go, oh, okay, this is where we're going with it. So it kind of works both ways in the preparation, and a lot of it is the ambience. I think the island of Hawaii is its own character. And so when you're, in the sun and the wind, the trade winds are blowing, and, you're sitting on the beach, and, there's this kind of a natural ease about, like, hey, this is fantastic,
And lastly, going back to what you were saying earlier about how this show has been your first series regular, playing a character and arcing them in the way that you had to, what would you say are the skills and tools that you feel like you've walked away with that were really unique to working on this project and taking on a series regular role in it?
Um, it's it's the switching of the shows. Like going from, because it's a half-hour show, so you're like doing little snippets of scenes, and then all of a sudden you're into a next episode, and it's like, oh, it's like, okay, now what's this about? So it's like these mini movies, and it's like it's almost, even though it's the same character, you're still switching gears to prepare for what the plot of the next episode is. And I think just having that dexterity to be able to bounce from one. And then sometimes they were shooting two episodes back to back, like at the same time. So they would take, what is it, 2 weeks, and then the 2 weeks would be like two episodes, but they would intertwine them. So you do, let's say you do like a scene from episode 6, and then you jump over, and the next day you do a scene from episode 7, and then the next day you do another scene from episode 6. And then some days you'd have 6 and 7 scenes going on at the same time. So I think just technically that was a big kind of learning curve for me. As well as I was talking earlier about the pacing, about speaking fast and all that.
Well, I love everything that you've done performance wise in the show. And I think as much as Benny is a really infectious character to the rest of the characters within the show, that energy also really transcends across the screen when you're watching it as an audience member. So congratulations on everything with the series so far. And
Cool.
thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Jason.
Thank you. Take care, Mara.